They thought that we were special forces. They thought that we was a Russian mob, and they thought that we'd gone in there for sensitive information on the motherboards. And next thing I knew, I had MI5 on us, MI6, and we had a 70-man squad. You know, it wasn't until a year later that I was arrested. And then the whole street came alive for old Bill. I realised how serious it was.
Welcome to the Andrew Paskin podcast. Today we're joined by reformed career criminal and now prison reform activist, Mr. Terry Ellis. How are you today?
I'm fine, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be on your show today.
Oh, thanks so much for doing it. You and I are Twitter buddies, so it's good to finally talk to you.
Lovely.
Well, I'll give the listeners a bit of a quick overview of your life because it's quite the life. I mean, you've been involved in crime since you're a little boy through no fault of your own, and you become a serious bank robber, armed robber, gangster basically. And then you went into a therapy prison at Grendon and changed your life. And now you're out there advocating for the youth and trying to stop crime and kids getting into organised crime and knife crime and stuff like that. Quite the journey, mate.
Yeah, it's been an eventful 10 years. I got nicked in 2008 and, I've been in prison before as a young guy. My first sentence was 4 years. I think I was 16 then. I got done for a load of armed robberies. I was in a care home and I left the care home. I met these older guys. I was only, I think, 15, 16, and they offered me to assist them in some robberies. And I ended up doing a number of robberies, banks, building societies. And by the time I was 18, I was just starting my first 4-year sentence in a young offenders prison.
Well, let's get into how you got there, Terry, because it's really sad. Like I was reading your life story there, and I was having shedding a tear without a joke because it was that sad.
Yeah.
So, like, your mother was a professional shoplifter, right?
From a very early age, we were brought up to believe that anything we wanted, we could just take. Every shop my mum went in, she would just take things. She was a professional shoplifter. So I grew up thinking that it was okay to walk into any shop and take exactly what I wanted. It was only if I got arrested that it was wrong. She would then give me an ID. As I got older, she then used to take me and put me into warehouses, and I'd, go into dark warehouses in the middle of the night, and I'd pass out the loot. I thought I was the favoured child because I had 2 sisters and a brother who never knew that my mum was actually doing this. She used to wake me up at 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes. I never used to get into 4 or 5. And then I had to go to school the next day, which had a disruptive influence on my education. However, at the age of 11, I was playing truant. I was quite conflicted because all the other kids didn't know about it. My friends' parents were all working and they never knew what was going on. And, this made me angry, made me resentful. And then one day, I came home from school and she said, "Got a bag here for you. I'm taking you someplace. You're going to spend a couple of hours there. I'll come and pick you up later on." I think I was 11 years old then. And I went to a place called Langtree Walk in Swiss Cottage. And I walked in there and she handed me over and she said, "I'll see you later." And I can always remember the door shutting, looking at her, and she just walked away, smiled and said goodbye.
That's so heartbreaking.
I was in a kid's home.
That's really, really heartbreaking.
Yeah, at the time, the person I loved the most and would do anything for, which I did, really just turned around and abandoned me. And I think that was the catalyst for me, becoming the person I was. My brothers and sisters are all straight guys, never been in trouble. And I was just so violent, so volatile. And it was the consequence of that, of her, that one action that really turned me. Unfortunately, being volatile and angry and violent then got me noticed by my peers. And then I then got offered lots of things as I got older. But I remember my first evening there was, I'd never been hit by a grown-up, and I can remember saying, "I want to go home," and this guy just punched me straight in the face. And then they had the procedure where they would just jump on you and hold you down. And the next thing I knew was 4 or 5 guys on me and a woman. One of them punched me again in the face and said, "Like, you ain't going nowhere until you calm down. We're going to hold you down." And this went on for a few weeks until I sort of curtailed my behaviour and realised that, that there was just no way of getting out of this place unless I was willing to take a night in. And as a young kid, surrounded by grown men and women, I was quite scared,
Is that in the 70s or the 80s, that boys' home?
I think that was in the 70s. I think it was late 70s, 74s, 78.
Every violent criminal you read about in Australia, England or America in that era that become, a proper gangster was in a boys' home getting beat up by adults. I mean, I don't know if they fixed it up now. I mean, it can't be as bad as it was, surely. But, I mean, I don't think it's still great. But, I mean, what did they think was going to happen abusing a child? Like,
I think, back in them days, they thought they could punish you into submission and punish you into doing the right thing.
Mm.
As a 12-year-old kid or 11-year-old kid, it's quite hard to comprehend that you just want to go home. You want to go and see your brothers and that.
Yeah.
And sisters. So, the first thing you do is you try to go, and then, and then to be held down. Because I don't know if you've ever been hit by, as a kid, by a grown parent. It's probably one of the most frightening experiences I ever went through. Yeah.
Bloody awful.
So, it's something that stayed with me for many years. And then something I said that would never happen again. Unfortunately, it never did, because I was then prepared to use gratuitous violence on anyone that even threatened me or looked at me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And, I was prepared to use anything. I would pick up with anything that was near me, a tool, a gun, a knife, and I would, that would be it. It was a learning lesson that stayed with me forever, and and kept me in good stead. I actually rationalised it as one of the best things that happened to me, stupidly.
Well, you don't know any better at the time, do you? When you're a child, that's when your formative years are. But not only did your mother drop you at this boys' home and pretend you're going to get picked up and then left you, your father was an armed robber.
Yeah, my father was absent for the minute I was born. My dad was gone, so he just, he used to come down in the evening. If we did anything wrong, our mum would tell him, and he would then take the belt to us. He'd give us 6 of the best. He'd hold my brother out a window. He gave my brother a black eye. It was just me and my brother, because my 2 sisters never ever got anything done to them, but we seemed to get the brunt of everything. So, coming up, they say violence begets violence. So, I had a violent father who gave out basins at the drop of a hat. I had a mother that every 5 minutes was running out in front of buses and telling us that she was going to commit suicide. And then one day, after doing everything to placate her and do everything she asked me, she then put me in a home. Which to a young kid is so confusing. It was just, I don't know, it's crazy. I never actually gave it any thought at the time. I actually rationalised my being in care as a young kid as one of the best things that happened to me, because I wasn't at home. And then I went into other homes after that. I remember going to Stamford House, and I, if you know Shepherd's Bush, you probably do. You lived over here. It was a black area. And I was one of the only white kids in this home. And, as soon as I walked in there, I was a target. And after a few weeks, I was quite handy, and I just rebelled. And I fought my way through there. And then I was, within a month or 2 months, I was respected. And I thought, if I can fight and I can stab and I can put a chair across someone's head, this is acceptable. And then I can prove myself. No one's going to come near me. So it just made me more violent. So statistically, I think I was exactly what society or the care system made me. And I think they set me up for a prison.
Well, absolutely. And the fact that they let you out of this one and put you into a flat with some older armed robbers just defies belief to me.
I can remember coming back to London. They put me in a community home for a couple of years, and everything was going okay. I met a young girl, and she was abandoned by her family. We found solace in each other's arms. She got pregnant, and they kicked me out. And they moved me back to London and put me in a shared flat with a couple of other guys who were armed robbers. And
I mean, that's just incredible.
Yeah, it's crazy. I never, you couldn't make it up if you tried. But unfortunately, in them days, it was just chuck you in and hopefully I'd turn out okay. But there was never no supervision. It was just, a 15-year-old kid living in the middle of London who was getting 23 quid a week to feed himself, and that was it. And I was left to my own devices. And unfortunately, when you've got young kids who are left to their own devices, we make our own rules and regulations, and we live by it. We don't accept authority no more. We rebel. And, we made our own rules up, and the rules were we go out and take what we wanted. And these guys were hardened criminals, and I followed suit. And next, I knew I was 17, 18, and I was going to building sites, with a sawn-off shotgun. And, it's just crazy.
What do you think they were thinking putting you in this house? Do you think they just thought you were incorrigible and you couldn't be helped, or that they were just lazy and just thought, just get rid of him, I don't want him here?
I think what they thought is that they could put me in this place, that these other guys will lead by example, and I'll be okay. I think, I don't think these guys actually told the authorities or the people that put them in that home that they were actually armed robbers. They obviously told them they were working and living a constructive life, and they thought that their good behaviour would rub off on me. Unfortunately,
right.
Like most things in life, they were lying.
How does a kid in their teens acquire a sawn-off shotgun, especially in London, where guns aren't as big as America?
If you look in the right places, you can find anything in London. It's renowned. We're renowned for armed robberies. I think in South London, North London, the jump ups and violent crime. So to go into a shebeen or a drinking club and buy a shotgun was quite easy.
Right.
You know, we had our own drinking clubs around there where all the grown-ups went. And anyone who was up and coming thief or villain or armed robber could go to them places. If you had money, you just had to go in there and ask behind the counter, and you can buy anything you wanted.
Well, you mentioned South London. So in Australia, we hear about the Krays. Obviously, we hear about the Richardson gang. But you grew up in the north with Terry Adams and his brothers, the most serious of figures in that field.
Yeah, you know, we aspire to be villains. You know, we never knew anything else. You know, if you got, you know, I suffered from dyslexia, and I was excluded from school. I was excluded from everything. And, you know, I actually just thought I was stupid. But when I was with my peers who were criminals, I was someone, you know, I wanted to aspire to be like them. You know, most of the guys I knew were armed robbers. You know, most of the guys I knew were drug dealers or thieves. We had a hierarchy that, you know, that we wanted to aspire to. It wasn't like going to university or college and, you know, working in a bank or anything else. We all wanted to be villains. That's all we knew. And we wanted to be the best.
Yeah, it's another trope of, you know, talk about being behind the eight ball. Like the mafia figure, Sammy the Bull Gravano, was also a guy that suffered dyslexia. He had the embarrassment in school. Yeah. He used to punch the teachers out and everything when people were laughing at him and stuff like that, same as you. But he was a genius at planning crimes like you and found solace in that.
As a young kid, you know, you don't understand embarrassment or ego, you know, or shame. You know, and the last thing you want to do is feel like you're stupid in front of your peers. You know, you would go to any lengths to disrupt the class or you get kicked out of it because you'd rather get kicked out than actually lose face in front of all your friends that you couldn't spell. So, you know, so I can understand that. And yes, I understand that the Sammy the Bull, but I also know a lot of my friends who suffer from dyslexia. And because we never had an opportunity to actually work on that, you know, in school or wherever we were, you know, the only other option for us was crime. I actually was sent out of my class. And they put me on the farm for 2 years because I couldn't spell. You know, instead of actually working with me, they actually said, you know what, this kid's a stop his arseholes. Let's put him on the farm. So I spent 2.5 years on the farm as a young kid where I should have been in school learning. You know, so, you know, this is how they treated me and this is how we responded.
Well, on the plus side, these days, I think they're more on the ball with dyslexia. I mean, I think they've learnt their lesson for the kids coming through now. But in those days, it was just they didn't either understand it or they didn't care, did they?
I think it's a bit like a few kids in my class that were left-handed.
Yeah.
And even though they know that they were actually hit and beaten by the teacher, so actually right-handed.
Can you imagine it?
So it was stupid in days. I think, you know, that they're more aware of dyslexia. And I think, if you can work with a kid who's got dyslexia, he is more likely to work through it and find different ways of learning. And then he would then become a more productive member of society. Where we, unfortunately, we were just excluded and sort of disregarded. Got a load of guys and they think they've got nowhere to go. They would go out and take. And that's what we did. We was like an army of thieves, you know, back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, I had 8 or 9 guys that I worked with, and all of them were dyslexic. Or they couldn't read. Or they just felt they were stupid. And that then made us really work. By the time we were, you know, 14, 15 years old, we was out grafting every day. We was earning money. We had the nice clothes. But we, you know, and we thought that having nice clothes and a car and our own gap made us men, made us like respected. Unfortunately, you can't buy respect and you can't nick respect. You have to earn it.
Well, it's interesting the role of ego in your transformation because after you went to Grendon and you did the therapy, you sort of let go of the ego, didn't you?
There was a few things for me, you know, that used to really get me in trouble. One of them was boredom. You know, if I got bored, I would go out and womanize. You know, I would go out and drink. I would go out and take drugs. You know, my ego was massive. You know, I lived a hedonistic lifestyle. If someone dented my ego, they'd get a right hand up.
Yeah.
You know, it's only by going into therapy that I realised I was really acting out of fear. I was acting out of embarrassment and shame and everything else. And, you know, once you start to understand, you know, why you are the way you are, you can only go in one direction. Instead of fight and flight and, you know, attack all the time, you know, you start to articulate. But I can only do that by going to therapy because I then put myself in a situation where the people that I was surrounded by were some of the most dangerous criminals in England.
Well, this is what's amazing about this story because you've done a lot of time in normal jail where it's, you know, it's us against the screws and, you know, you have to be tough to survive and all the rest of it. And then they put you in this therapy jail, HMP Grendon, and that's full of killers, child killers, rapists, pedophiles, etc., like the worst of the worst. And you had to sort of let go of your normal prison attitude towards those blokes to change yourself, right? You
know, the only tool I had in normal prison was my fist in violence. Yeah. So, you know, when I went to Grendon, we couldn't use violence. We signed a compact saying that we would not use violence. We would actually, learn to talk. And that was the old, once you sign that compact, there was a different way. So, the violence was out of the equation. You had to start learning to articulate and, have a measured response. When I first started going into therapy, I started swearing, calling them names, using their offence against them. And then, when that didn't work and I realised that was futile, I then, started to think about what I said, and then I started to articulate responses that would get a better response from me. And over a period of time, the old me started to go, and it was replaced by someone who's a lot calmer, not so angry, someone who was prepared to argue and articulate a response instead of screaming at someone. As a kid, I used to get into fights, and I would always say, I wish I never done that, or, next time this happens to me, I won't do that. And then 6 months later, I'd be in the same situation again, and I'd forgotten exactly my promises I made to myself.
Mm-hmm.
It was only by being in Grendon that I was able to see that behaviour every day and start to understand my body and the adrenaline rush in the fight and flight situation. I was able to start controlling it instead of it controlling me.
Well, Terry, it sounds like you didn't do too much flighting. You did a lot of fighting by the sound of it.
Yeah, it was hard. I spent 2.5 years there. I met some interesting people, and I met some atrocious people that sickened me. And I heard stories that most people should never have to listen to. It's not like normal prison.
Well, the title of your book, Living Among Beasts, like that couldn't be more apt. That's a exact description of what you were doing.
I can always remember going it and my friend saying to me, you're going to be living amongst the beasts. And it always stuck me. So when I wrote the book, I couldn't have named it anything else because I can remember going in there and listening to people that killed their daughters, sons, brothers, sisters, mums and dads. And, after a while it grated on me, and then I think what I realised after a time is that I couldn't let their offences dictate my therapy. I could have blamed them for being deviant, scum, rapists and everything else. And I could have kept to that narrative all the way through. But it wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about me looking at myself. So, after a few months, I couldn't use their offences against them. But I had to listen to their logic. I had to listen to them tell me about my behaviour, about my criminal values. And instead of throwing their offences back in their face, I had to listen. And that was the beauty of that place, is because after a while, you had to humanise these people in an extent where you had to engage with them, on a different level. And you had to put their offences aside. And that taught me tolerance, which I think was one of the biggest lessons I learned. I was never really good with boredom, tolerance, ego, embarrassment, or shame. These are all the things that got me into trouble.
Well,
and these are the things that people kill for.
This is what was heartwarming about reading about your life, is that, in jail, you got to make out that you, well, everyone hates pedophiles, but you got to really make out you hate pedophiles in jail, and you got to bash them on sight. You got to do this, you got to do that. But you're like, I want to change my life that badly that I'm going to tolerate these people. And you had to let go of your ego. You had to let go of your macho side a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think once you let go of ego, it's probably one of the most liberating experiences. I met men inside who were doing life sentences because someone had trodden their foot, because someone had looked at them the wrong way. And they all turned around to me at the end of the day and said, so I wish I'd never done that. And I think by me going here, and I learned about my ego and learned to let go of it, I'm able to look at myself now, I'm able to laugh at myself, and take the piss out of myself and let other people do the same, because I know no matter what anyone says about me, I've been there and done it,
The old argument of nature versus nurture comes out in your book because, well, the first book anyway.
Yeah.
You got the new one coming out too.
I've got H.M.P. Help Me Prepare. It's a guide for prisoners for first timers and their families. I've also got Grendon Therapy, The Inside Story, and I just published another one, it's called Resettlement, The Final Countdown to My Freedom. So I wanted to prove to everyone that because I had dyslexia, that it doesn't mean I was stupid. I sat down with an electric dictionary and I wrote every single one of these books.
Genius.
Just to prove to my family and friends that I could do it, and also to prove to myself that I was capable. Because I always felt that I was smart. I just wasn't given an opportunity to express myself, and thank God for modern technology now. I can talk into a phone and ask it to spell something, and I can write it down straight away.
Yeah, brilliant.
So I can write anything I think about now instead of writing, repetition. And I can write with a thesaurus, and I love words. I love writing now. I love poetry. It opened up a whole new world for me, over the last few years. And it's one of my passions now, is teaching young kids to actually express themselves through poetry, through song, and through writing. And because it will free them. I don't think anyone should be held back because they got a label, like dyslexia or stupid.
And the fact you got 3 books out is amazing. But this experiment with the therapy, it's a big example of nature versus nurture. Like, I would consider you a nurture problem, abused as a child, etc., and become a criminal.
Also, I think everything I learned was a learned behavior. I learned to hate. I learned to fight. I learned to, be the way I was. I think if it's in your nature to be deviant, you're always going to be deviant. It's like your sexuality. If someone told me tomorrow that I had to change my sexuality because I'm telling you so, there's no way that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I believe that you're a rapist or a paedophile, and that's your nature, and that's what you enjoy, and that's what gets you your rocks off. If some prison governor or some psychologist says that the only way you can get out of prison is to turn around and say, yes, I totally agree with that, and I'm going to change, then I'm going to tell you you're a liar.
Yeah.
Because every person I met in prison was a rapist or deviant. I saw their behaviours time and time again. I never saw them change. But what I did see, I saw the perception of change. Right. And I thought it was wrong. That's the reason I wrote the book. I believe that you can change someone like me. You can change a recidivist. But I don't think because someone's got caught and they want to get out of prison, they're going to say anything. They're going to tell you whatever you want to hear.
Well,
because why would they want to do 20 or 30 years in prison when they can get out in 15 or 10 because they've done a psychology course?
I couldn't agree more, mate. The part in the book that wanted me to shut down, if I had the keys to Grendon, I would have shut it down after reading this, was the bloke that murdered his girlfriend and 2-year-old girl at a golf club, and then you walk into his cell and he's playing PGA Tour golf on the PlayStation.
Every day was a different atrocity. I can remember talking to a guy, he'd only been there a few minutes. The whole thing was based on truth and honesty. And he said, that his daughter actually, she asked to die. How can you logicalize with someone like that? And his story was that he had split up. He was going through a divorce with his wife. He had a 9-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old daughter. And what he decided one night was to commit suicide. So what he did, he had a bottle of whiskey, and then he had some pills, and he started drinking. And he was crying. He was upset. And about 1:30 in the morning, his daughter came down, and she said, Daddy, why are you so upset? He said, I'm going to heaven. And she said, Daddy, can I come to heaven? And he said, yes. So he gave her a pill and a little drink, and then she was unconscious, but she didn't die. So he then put a bag over her head, and he suffocated her. But as she was, as she was dying, she was scratching his arms and everything else. And he said, and she died. And then he said, I then tried to kill myself, but then I woke up. He said, but she wanted to die. And for me, I've got kids. I'm fucking, I was just being in company with the killing. I learned so much. I learned tolerance, but how can you logicalize with these people?
You can't.
We think these places are going to be the medicine that cures all the crap that goes on in the world. It doesn't, There are so many people with the same psychopathy or psychopath that don't go on to kill, but are very good businessmen.
Yeah.
But what do we achieve by putting these people in these places and spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds every year, or dollars? What do we learn? We should be treating the people that we believe have had learned behaviours, the recidivists, the drug addict, someone who's learned and been addicted to something. We should be treating these people. Anyone who commits these atrocities should just be put in prison. You can't fathom that. You can't logicalise, and you definitely will not get the truth out of them. So, but we waste in this country millions and millions of pounds of people in special prisons. And then we put the people that actually need the help in like warehouses of prisons around England. And we don't give them nothing. They all come out, there's nowhere to live. But we spend all the money on these lot. The more deviant the crime, the more help you get in this country.
Well, after your experience in there, can you spot someone that's just not right, like a psychopath straight away, just talking to them?
I think the one thing I did learn is that monsters and paedophiles don't look like nothing you've ever experienced. We have a perception on the telly that they have to be some dirty old man leering at a girl. But where he's your brother, he's your sister. He's your uncle. He's someone that you least expect, your school teacher, the vicar. You can't tell the difference, trust me. No matter how long you do in prison and how many of these people you meet, you'll never be able to look at someone and say he's a paedophile or rapist or he's going to murder. It's just impossible. If you look at Jimmy Savile, now Jimmy Savile was a master manipulator. He actually got the keys to Broadmoor. He actually raised £30 million for children and everything else, and he was a paedophile. He hid in plain sight. We look at one of Australia's favourite brothers, or we look at Rolf Harris. We look at this guy that used to work in a vet, with dogs, and you felt he was compassionate.
Yeah.
He drew pictures for the Queen, and all of a sudden he was molesting young girls. So you know what? If we couldn't see him in plain sight, how can you spot your next door neighbour or your brother or your cousin?
Well, I've got to say, both of those guys I suspected, but, but I get your point. But
what I'm saying is, it's almost impossible. I think as the years went by, I think that, their lewd behaviour became apparent, especially Jimmy Savile's. But I think, if anyone wants to hide their deviant behaviour, there's no one on God's earth you're going to ever find that. I think you could live with someone for 40 years and you'll never know the true them. People only give you what they want.
But the question I've got for you about this therapy that's helped you so much is, why did it have to be amongst these lunatics? Why couldn't it have been in the normal jail?
I think when it was first conceived in 1964, I think it was conceived, I think it was looked upon as a revolutionary place. And I think it just evolved. I think they took the worst because the worst, they're more manageable. A rapist and a paedophile, a wife killer, child killer, they're pretty more manageable than people who are in for armed robbery. So what they did, they started on this law. And when the take-up rate went down, they started accepting armed robbers. I don't know. For me, I think it only worked because just being in their company and being repulsed by them on a daily basis, and the way I felt, as I said, it gave me tolerance. Yeah, and it worked. It would not have worked in a normal prison, So, and it was a constant battle. It was a constant battle between myself and them to actually just stay there. So I think once you learn tolerance, you're capable of doing anything, It's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned. I can actually walk away. If someone just comes in my face and starts effing and blinding, before I'd have just weighed them in. I'd have just done them on the spot. But now they can say anything they want. They can shout, scream, whatever. It doesn't affect me no more. But it's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned, And I think it only worked because they were there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. But, I mean, the attitude in regular jail of like, you have to hate the screws and you can't talk to the screws and you can't do this. If they want you to bash this guy, you got to do this. It's all about violence. Like, is there any way to get that, the less adversarial nature of Grendon into regular prison?
Yeah, I think if you start treating people like human beings and you start giving them education, you start giving them a trade and you start giving them a bit of self-worth, then yes, it will change. But unfortunately, if you go into a mainstream prison or a local prison, they see so many prisoners coming through there. They have to be abrupt, obnoxious, and they have to be confrontational with the screws. So you're never going to get the best out of the inmates. So it then becomes them and us. The good thing about Grendon is that as much as I hated the screws, and I've been in more blocks, I've had more kickings from screws than most people I've ever met. And I hated them. However, to actually do therapy, you had to talk to these guys. So over a period of 3 months when I was on the induction wing, for me to read the paper, I had to go into the office and read it, which was taboo in any other prison I've been. But you had to walk into the screws office to actually read the paper. Now, you wasn't allowed to have the telly on all day, so the only other option was to go into the office to read the paper. So over a period of a couple of weeks, you then dipped your toe in and you went into the office. And then all of a sudden, they said, "Hello, Terry." And you say, "Hello, Gov." And they say, "It's not Gov, it's John." So the next day you go in there and they say, "Hello, Terry." You say, "Hello, John." And over a period of weeks, you know all the screws' names. You'll then function on a completely different level with them. Well, now you're starting to humanize them. And that's the difference between a mainstream prison and Grendon, is because they actually went out of their way to make you humanize them, And unfortunately, they haven't got the time or the inclination in most mainstream prisons to actually do that. Well, and, when you think about it, Grendon has only got 228 men in the whole prison.
Yeah.
And there's 40 men on each wing. So you got 8 or 9 screws on each wing. And you got psychologists, facilitators. You can have them relationships. If you got 1,000 men in a prison and you've only got 50 screws, then you got the opportunity to humanize them. So then becomes you and us. You have your own world. Normal prison is very parasitic. It's about drugs. It's about one-upmanship. It's about violence. It's about bullying. It is about survival. But Grendon is completely different. It's a completely different animal.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to go there.
I don't know. It's just like, I used to be in criminal law for a bit, and I've been to a few jails, and I don't really understand how you get through it. But from my experience, you've got 2 types of screws. You've got the dead shit, just there for the pay, doesn't really care, and then you've got the sadist guy on steroids, wants to be a tough guy type one, But if they could weed all those guys out and then get just some reasonable people, do you think they could ever change the adversarial nature, or do you think it's just because of it's the nature of the beast?
I think for years and years, the job attracted ex-servicemen, yeah? So what happened, you have the majority of ex-servicemen in there that despise criminality. So what they did, they ganged together. They were like prisoners. They were a big gang.
Yeah.
If you hurt one of them, they came down on you like a ton of bricks, which then you sort of respected, because now you go into prison. All them prison officers are not there now. They've all gone. They've been replaced by, younger guys that have, got less than 2 years experience on a wing.
Mm.
So now you've got prisons in this country that are rife with spice, rife with drugs, rife with gangs, rife with bullying. It's a different animal than when I was there.
Mm.
You know, we had the days when you had the Neanderthal screw. They used to just do it for sport. They'd come in their cell, beat the shit out of us.
Yeah.
You know, and that was sport. That was them having a laugh because they were bored sitting in the office. You know, so they would come around to the cells and they'd beat the shit out of us. And that would be fun. You know, and new guys that come down the block, they would do exactly the same. So, you know, thank God them days are gone. I think we went for a revolution in this country where they started taking the screws to task and taking them to court. They lost a few battles, and I remember Wandsworth, you know, they took a load of officers there to court and they won. And I think after that, you know, there was new implementations, and I think the violence, you know, it still happens. There's no doubt about it. But I don't think they could do it now. I think that the prison population now just won't put up with it.
There's something about the psychology, the dehumanization of the prisoner, where it always surprised me that no one killed a prison guard when they got out, you know, like organized crime figures, murderers, just tough guys in general. Like, is there something when you're in jail that it sort of breaks you or something? Because it's always surprised me that these guys could bash you for 6 years and then you see them on the street and you don't kill them.
You know what? Because we never saw them on the street.
Right.
We never saw him out. Trust me, if I'd have seen one of them on the street, I'd have fucking put him out of the game.
Right.
Unfortunately, you never saw none of them. You know, I think back in the day, you know, you went into prison. You know, you had to wear their shoes, which are 2 sizes too small. You had to wear their pants, their trousers, their tops, and you showered once a week, and you shit in a piss pot.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So, you know, the whole situation was degraded. You had the truculent nature of the screws. You know, you just got a recipe for that. You know, you're making animals. And that's what they churned out. You know, it's a completely different now. You go into prison now, you've got your own clothes, you've got radios, you've got your television. You know, the prison actually goes a lot smoother than it ever did. I can remember doing time and a day was like a week. A week was like a month. A month was like a year. You know, I just done a prison sentence. I've been out now 3 years. And that 8.5 years I've done was actually quicker than the 4.5 years I did before.
Wow.
You know, because I had the radio, I had the work, and I had therapy. You know, it just seemed to go so quick. You know, there wasn't enough hours in the day, you know. But I think it's because I then started to read and I started to write. I then started to do so many things. I started to enjoy it. I started to be more creative. And I think if you can install that in a prisoner and the desire to change, you have a recipe or the medicine for rehabilitation. Unfortunately, the only people I know that are changing are people probably in their 50s because we've been there, done it. We've had enough. You can't, you know, change the mindset of a 25-year-old kid who's got nothing outside. You know, they've got the highest rent in Europe, 0 contract hours. And if they want to earn easy money, they will. It's only when you get to our age that you make so many promises to your kids and your family that you're not going to go back, that you actually start to believe it. And then you add a bit of Grendon into the equation, a bit of therapy. I became a born-again Christian, and that was the medicine. Well, you know, all them things came together for me.
The only people that we'll listen to are some proper gangsters like yourself, John A. These sort of guys that are going out and talking to the youth. If they listen to a guy who's done what they want to do and said that it's not worth it, there's a chance that they might listen.
Well, you know, I do talks now and I tell kids, you know, like, you know, what do you want to aspire to? You know, you want to aspire to doing 20 or 30 years in prison. Is that what you want? You know, because if you carry on selling drugs, you carry on getting into that life, eventually you will have to protect that lifestyle. You will have to kill someone. Someone will come and rob you. You'll have to kill them. You're going to get a life sentence. You're going to look in the mirror. You're going to get older. You're going to get thinner. All your friends are going to go home. Your family are going to die. And then you're going to come out a lonely old man. Is that what you really want? Is that what you want to aspire to? You know, and I do. I go into schools now. I tell them about the nighttime economy in prison. I tell them about the fear. You know, if you think the days are bad and it's violent in prison, night times are even worse because now you've got people cutting up, crying, people committing suicide. There's a smell of prison. You know, people have a perception of especially kids now, they think it's all PlayStation. They don't realise that you come out yourself for an hour a day for exercise and that's it. You know, so psychologically, you suffer from mental issues, isolation, people skills, everything you learn normally on the outside world. So, you know, I met loads of guys in prison who commit suicide. Loads of guys who had to go on antidepressants. You know, unless you're really strong, and there's not many of us, I would not wish on my worst enemy to do 24 hours in a prison cell, let alone 8 years or a life sentence. And that's what I tell the kids.
Like 24 hours in a cell, that's getting towards human rights abuse. I mean, a human being is not supposed to be locked up without contact for that long.
If we look at the COVID situation that's happening in Australia and everything else, you know, they're making their own rules up. So it's the same as in England. You know, there's no exercise. This is what's happening in English prisons now. You're actually getting your food delivered to your cell now. You can't come out. You can't go and exercise because, they're afraid that the coronavirus is going to spread. So some of them are doing 24 hours a day bank until further notice. And this is not going to change for another year. And the work that we're given is unbelievable. You're putting tea bags and plastic bags and fucking hairnets. There was a time when you could go into prison and be a paint decorator. You could learn how to do plastering. You could learn how to do bricklaying, carpentry. Everything's shut down at the moment. There's nothing there apart from go in there, sell and watch television and smoke spice.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing is when you've got bored men inside prison, they then turn on each other. I've seen guys inside prison and they would roll a spice joint to somebody who wanted one, and they'd say, look, it's a spice joint, but what I'm going to do first, I'm going to punch you in the face for this joint. And the guy would say yes, because he wants that joint so badly.
Bloody hell.
And they'd punch him in the face and try and knock him out. You'd pit two cons against each other. And I've seen them, they'd say fight each other, and they'd be punching the fuck out of each other for a split. Because, you got bored men inside prison. They get out of so much shit, it's unbelievable, because they haven't got the staff inside English prison anymore to actually to police it. So what the guys do, they're like a law to themselves now on the landing, and unfortunately when you've got lawless landings inside prison, it becomes a very dangerous place to live. That's why we've had in the last couple of years, I think we've had 8 or 9 riots, and they're the only ones that have been actually put in the news. It's happening all the time now. So you've got, I think it's 10 or 20,000 prison officers have been taken out of the prison system over the last 11 or 12 years. And they can't replace them quick enough because they're actually losing 6,000 or 7,000 a year anyway. So they can't even replace them. So they're down 20 or 30,000 prison officers before they start the day. So, they just haven't got the manpower now to actually control British prisons. I'd say the cons now control English prisons, and they allow the screws to actually walk on their landings. That's how bad it is. But, there's no government body who actually admit that. But if you talk to any con now that comes out of prison, they say, it is absolutely murdering. Spices on every single prison, every landing is rife. It's unbelievable.
Well, the fact that they let you out of prison and gave you a blue tent, do you want to talk about that? Because that, to me, you're setting blokes up to fail, because the average dickhead will say, oh, mate, if they don't like going to jail, don't commit the crime. But it's like when you get out of jail and you've got no skills and you've got no house and they give you a tent, you haven't got much choice, have you?
I spent the last year in open prison where I expected to get some work. I had all good intentions and changing my life around and doing something positive. And from the minute I got there, I started trying to get rehoused. And unfortunately, they haven't got nothing inside prison that is set up for people leaving homeless. So when you actually leave prison, you have to get a travel warrant to go back to the town or the city where you live. Mm. And to get that travel warrant, you have to give a postcode or an address. Any address will do. And that's classed as a successful rehousing. It's crazy. They actually got statistics now and say, like, they said last month 150 prisoners left prison and they all were successfully rehoused. And the reason they were successfully rehoused is because they had to give a postcode, to get the travel warrant. Now, if that fails, when you leave on the actual day, they actually say you can't leave prison now unless you give us a fucking postcode. And if you don't give us a postcode, you can't leave prison. So that statistically they're telling the truth, but it's not the truth. Statistically, they're right because everyone's going out to a postcode and somewhere to live. But theoretically, they're all going out homeless to live on someone's city, or but that's for most of them living on the street.
Well, that's my point. It's like, I'm going to be very black and white here with the dollars and cents. I mean, it costs a lot of money to put someone in prison. It costs a lot of money to keep them in prison. And then when you put them out and you're guaranteeing them almost they're going to go back to prison, you're just throwing money away as well, besides the human element.
It's the same in this country, for anything. Unless you actually commit a crime, you won't get any help. It costs £120,000 to put someone through the court process and put them in prison for a year. 120,000 quid. And then every year they're inside, it costs another £40,000. But the minute they get out of prison and they need that help, they get 53 quid. So they have to commit a crime to actually get a roof over their head. We've been doing this for 100 years now, 200 years, yeah? Nothing's changed. It's still the same. We still got the same amount of prisoners, the same people doing the revolving door of recidivism. Nothing's actually changed because nothing's working.
I saw you talking to Jeremy Corbyn in one of your photos online, and have you had much chance to talk to other politicians about prison reform?
I talked to Keir Starmer. I talked to Jeremy Corbyn. So I talked all the front bench about it. We talk about the revolving door of recidivism. 40% of prisoners are there the revolving door. Now, I'll give you just an example. When you go into prison, you can choose to go to education, or you can work on the land, yeah? And most people that go into prison, most of them have had the advantages in life. They've got a good education, they've had a good school, they've been to university, college, and they've had all the chances in life, and they've still fucked up. These are the people that go into prison, do one sentence, and never come back again.
Yeah.
So what these guys do, they go into prison. The first thing they do is they sign on to education because it's an easy thing. Yeah. So you've got 60% of people going in sign on to education because the education gets paid by results. There's bums on seats. All they're doing is teaching people that have got degrees and have been to college and everything else. The 40% that should be in class and they should be working with are on the landings mopping the floors. These are the people with dyslexia, reading problems, everything. If we took all the people that have had all the advantages in life, good educations, and we made them mop the floors, we took them 40%, instead of working on bonuses and bums on seats and auditing, we work on them 40%, we give them an education, we give them a trade, and we give them somewhere to live. Then the chance of them 40% coming back again is going to be nil. And all of a sudden, the returning rate of the recidivists will go right down. I saw guys, doing 2 or 3 prison sentences, and all they do is mop land. They can't read, can't write, but because they're not educated enough, they can't go into fucking class. It's crazy. It's just unbelievable.
Well, there's got to be a way around it. There's got to be a manual trade that can help a bloke.
I think what you do is when you go to prison, if you say you've been to university, you've been to college, then you can't go to school inside prison.
That makes sense, actually.
You should then do a job that benefits the prison. If you go into prison and you say, I can't read, can't write, then your whole sentence is based on education. You educate a man, you educate him out of poverty, you educate him out of becoming a criminal. Most of the guys that I've ever met in my life, they're the ones that can't read or write. They're the ones that go into criminality. If you educate these guys at a very young age and you gave them some self-worth, they will not go into crime. I don't think there are people that choose a life of crime because of the money and everything else. But I'd say quite the majority of them go into crime simply because one is addiction, and 2 is because of their education and the social and economic upbringing they've had. But if you give them a good education, most of the people I've ever met in my life that have had a good education never go into prison. Unfortunately, there are a few, But I think that's what we need to do. We need to shake it up. We need to say, look, you've had your chances. Fuck off over there. You haven't had none. Let's go and work on you, and let's see what we can make you this guy. We concentrate on the 60% because then we can audit them and say, look, in 2020 we had 60,000 people come through the system, and they've done all these courses and everything else, and they've gone on to be productive members of society. They're the guys that weren't coming back anyway. They're the guys that were fraudsters and everything else, and they're the guys that had all the advantages.
Yeah.
They're the same thing over and over again, expecting something different to happen.
Well, as far as saving money in the long run, I really think education is the key because they put a 70-man task force on you when you did this Ocean's 11 robbery. So you were doing all the post offices and the vans and all the rest of it, the armed robberies, and then you thought, hang on, we're getting too much jail time here. Let's get into some drug dealing.
What I did, I went to prison for armed robbery when I was younger. And when I came out, I went to live in Spain. I started running puff. And then I went to Amsterdam, started doing ecstasy, cocaine, and everything else I can get my hands on. And when I came back to England, I was getting looked at by the old bill. And, like criminals, we have to work every day. We don't get holiday pay. We have to go back to work. So what I did, I got a group of guys together, one of them ex-army, all guys I've grown up with, and we got a load of police uniforms. We had a dog, we got vans, a couple of cars, all police signed up. And what we did, we started doing IT sweeps. And the one we done Verizon. This is one of the biggest ones we did. That was 5 million. We went in there, I think there was about 8 or 9 security guards. We pulled up in the van. We said, we've had information received that someone was on the roof, so let us in. They let us in. We then tied up all the security guards, and then we tied up all the maintenance people and the workers in there. I think it was about 16 in all. And then we called the other guys in, and we unclipped all the motherboards. I think we shut down 3 countries, and JP Morgan put out private prosecution on me for 5 million. They thought that we were special forces. They thought that we was a Russian mob, and they thought that we got in there for sensitive information on the motherboards. And next thing I knew, I had MI5 on us, MI6, and we had a 70-man squad. It wasn't until a year later that I was arrested, and then the whole street came alive for old Bill. I realised how serious it was.
Can you talk about what it feels like when you're driving along, you park your car, and then everything's normal, going to go in for a cup of tea, and then you see all this? Like, what goes through your mind when you see these SWAT teams coming out?
I'll tell you what, I was in a place called Leagrave. I was on a boat, a canal boat, and I rented a little cottage in Leagrave. And I was just going for something to eat. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and I was walking along the street, and there's a little chicken cafe I used to go to just get some chicken. And I saw loads of people. I thought, what? There's quite a lot of people in the street I've never seen before. And I thought nothing on it. Next time I saw a car come towards me. It was like everything was in slow motion. The car came towards me. It mounted the curb and it came along the grass. I was walking beside a brick wall, 6 foot high. So I threw my phone over the wall. And as I went to turn around, there's another car came from behind me and they both smashed into each other. But luckily I jumped up in the air. I then rolled over onto the bonnet. And then a man pulled up. And next thing, a load of old Bill was all dressed in balaclavas. They all started getting out and whacking the life out of me. I actually thought I was getting kidnapped. And I was actually quite relieved when they said, no, we've got the bastard. We've got him. It's him. It's definitely him. And then I realised that they were the old Bill. And next thing I knew, there was like 20 or 30 of them all clapping and patting each other on the back. And then I was spread eagled on the floor, handcuffed, and placed in a car and taken back to London. And the rest is history. You know what I mean?
What point do you to put your head in your hands and go, I'm going to do 10 years here?
I went back to London. I spent 3 days in the cell, and next thing I knew, they were taking me to a place to get my ID thing, and then I had 8 old Bill with me. I ended up smashing one of them and just going over the wall. And then I got recaptured, and then they took me to Pentonville prison, and that's when I realised I was in trouble. I tried to escape, so now I was up for assaulting a copper. I was up for a load of armed robberies. And you know what? I was in Pentonville, probably the worst prisons in London. In a block full of cockroaches. And that's when I looked up and I thought, you know what? I'm not getting out of this. I'm in trouble. You know what I mean? And the next thing I knew, the judge offered me 23 years on a guilty plea. And I went on a new in and I got it down to 17 years. 16 years, 9 months it was. And that was it. And then that's when the realisation set in that I've been here, I've done it all before. What can I do different on this sentence? I've heard all the stories. I've been in all the prisons as a young man. What could I do different? And that's when I decided that I would try Grendon and try and change my ways. I think all in all, it was the best robbery I ever did. And I think the outcome was the best outcome because I got just enough years to actually take a good look at myself and say, you know what, I can't do this again. I have to change, not, for myself in particular and my kids and everything else, but I really needed to change for society because I can't be coming back in here. And that's what I did. I was fortunate. I was in a prison and I met these 3 guys and they were in their 60s and 70s and they all got A.P.Ps for robbery. I saw these young guys looking at them and they were speaking on the table and I was there and I thought, these guys are all looking at these guys and they're looking at them in awe that they want to spy. And I thought, well, I can't fucking do this. I don't want to be coming back at 60 years old and 70 years old and young kids looking at me as if I'm some sort of hero because I'm a fucking armed robber.
Yeah.
I want people to look at me and say, this guy's a really nice guy. So now I write books. Then I've started a knife crime campaign up in Camden Town called Camden Against Violence. And I've started just a new one with a guy called Ben Snap in Coventry called Change Your Life, Put Down Your Knife. We've got all the celebrity gangsters. We've got some real good guys there. And now we're going around, we're doing talks, we're doing podcasts. And we're saying, you know what, don't aspire to us. Don't be like us. Don't spend the rest of your life in prison. Get out of this game,
Which celebrity gangsters are you working with?
Do you know what? I've got Linda Carvey, the Black Widow. Mm. John Light is the mafia hitman.
Yeah, good bloke.
He was in America. He's a real nice guy. We got boxers, we got footballers, we got so many. We got Steve French.
He's a tough guy, Jesus.
He was a gangster in Liverpool. We've managed to get 4,000 new members in the last month, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
So you know what? We're going to make a difference. We're going to go around and we're going to teach these kids that there is a better life. There is hope out there. And we got a list of all the charities, all the organisations that can benefit a kid instead of taking them down. Because, selling drugs and being in gangs will only end one way, either death or prison. But we want to try and offer them a better future.
It's a beautiful ending, right, that you've come out this way. And it's a heartwarming story, legitimately. And it makes me a bit sad that they couldn't have just given you a bit of help with your dyslexia when you're 11 and saved you all these years in jail, saved the cops about £5 million in task forces. It's just like, it's all about education to me.
I think I've got to be philosophical about it all. I think if I never went to the depths of despair, if I never went to Grendon, I never got a long sentence, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So you know what? I think I had to go through the nightmare scenario that I did so I can give that and pass that knowledge on. I work in food banks now. I've just done 10,000 care packages for the elderly. You know, and I started up at soft meals with my daughters and their boyfriend. So you know what? It's my time now.
Yeah, it's lovely, mate.
You know, I'm a born again Christian. I go to church every week now, and you know, and I feel blessed. I feel like I had to go there to actually share my testimony.
Well, the one thing we haven't talked about is you've been sober now 14 years off the drugs and booze. Like I'm a guy who struggled with addiction myself, so I'm always interested in that. But how much do you reckon that's helped you getting out of that cycle?
You know what? When I started writing about therapy, it was to expose, you know, therapy for what it really was. But you know what? When I actually learned from it, I learned that by engaging in it and talking about my past, about dealing with my abandonment issues, my interpersonal relationships, it empowered me because, you know, I was always self-medicating for years. I was drinking, I was self-medicating because there was something missing in my life. It was only when I dealt with the problems I was then able to create a better future for myself and my family. I was able to empower myself to stop self-medicating because, you know, as soon as I stopped being angry and hated the authority in the world and stopped blaming everyone for being the way I was, I didn't need to self-medicate. I didn't need to smoke or drink or do anything. Or I used to have a different woman every other week before I went away because there was something missing in my life. I thought it was love. I had to go out and have sex every day because I thought it was love. And then I had to, you know, and every time I felt down, I had to have a drink. You know, every time I felt lonely, I had to have some Coke. But you know what? I don't get bored now. I don't get lonely. I'm loved. You know, it's empowered me. It made me so strong. I've done every sort of rehabilitation course there was before. You know, and nothing ever worked. It was only when I dealt with the issues that really affected me, my childhood, that I was able to move on. And I don't need a crutchman. I don't need drugs or smoking or nothing. It empowered me.
It's really brilliant, mate. Like, you hit the nail on the head for any addict out there. You got to deal with the underlying issue and then worry about the masking of it later. But like, if you just get off the substances or whatever you're doing, gambling, whatever it is, and you haven't fixed the issue, it's going to come back.
Yeah, you know, I always tell the guys, you know, the people I work with, they say, I'm going to move here, I'm going to move there. I say, well, all you're doing is you're moving the problem from there to there.
Yeah.
Why are you taking drugs in the first place? I think it's really important, you know, because I work with a lot of drug counselors now. I do talks in hospitals and that. And it's really about the desire to change. It's about the desire to talk about your past. You know, until you can actually talk about the things that really affect you, you're never, ever going to be able to move on. You're never going to be able to deal with the problem. And it's one of the reasons I wrote Living Amongst the Beasts, because all the way through the book is about my journey through it, about what I learned, and all the little epiphanies I had all the way through it. Yeah. You know, I didn't want it to work. I didn't go there because I thought it was going to work. I wanted to go there because it was something different. But you know what? As I engaged in it and I did it, in incremental changes all the way through, it changed me. I couldn't do anything other than change. And every single thing I learned is in that book. The reason I go around to schools, the reason I talk to people now is to give them the knowledge that I learned from living amongst the beasts and going to Grendon. I always tell people, if I could give you a special power that could stop you from drinking, smoking and womanizing and being a shit, would you take it? And they all say yes. And I say, well, first thing you have to do, you have to work on the thing that affects you the most. And you can't walk away from it. And then they start working on it, they start crying. Then all of a sudden, the anger goes, it dissipates. You never ever lose sight of what happened in your past. You know, the anger's not there no more. The frustration, you know, the hate, the despair and everything goes. And once that goes, you can then start moving forward. You know, unless you deal with it, you're never going to move forward.
Yeah, it's perfect, mate.
I put myself through the mill and I save so many people's lives, I'm not going to lie. And I get guys coming to me and saying, thanks, thank you, I really appreciate it. You know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be in this job. I wouldn't be drug-free and I wouldn't be in this relationship. And believe it or not, the majority of women that have read my book, and it's empowered them to speak about their childhood traumas, you know, being abused, being sexually abused, being physically abused. You know, it's actually empowered them as well. So, you know, I get messages from women all around the world and they say to me, thank you. And a few of them are writing books. A few of them have gone to the police and reported their abusers.
That's awesome.
So, you know what? I think we've empowered so many people to start speaking. If I can speak and I can cry and I can tell men not to, we were taught to bottle it up and stiff up a lip and take it like a man. Do you know what? That's all bollocks. That's why there was so much violence between their mums. That's why we saw so many of our granddads and dads on the piss every day and night or weekends. That wasn't the good old days. That was a bad old day. Yeah. If you got a father that can express himself and talk to you and cry and be human, that's what I want. That's what I want to aspire to. I don't want to be like my dad, go stiff up the lip and pissed every weekend and beating the shit out of my mum.
Yeah.
I know what I want. And that's what we teach them. We teach the kids to cry, to be normal. You know, that's what I do. I love doing what I do.
Well, I tell you what, mate, if you wrote a screenplay, you couldn't have written a better ending than you've had. I'm really pleased for you. It's a beautiful story, actually. So everybody get out there and get Living Amongst Beasts. It's a brilliant book. It's eye-opening, so if you want a nice, easy read, it's not going to be for you, but it's very fascinating. And you've got your other book coming out soon, is that right?
I've got Grendon's Therapy, The Inside Story. We've got Living Amongst the Beasts, The Rise and Fall of the Grendon Experiment. I've got HMP, Help Me Prepare, A Guide to Prison for First-Timers and Their Families. And the new one I'm just editing right now that should be in the bookshops opening. It's all on Kindle in the next few weeks. A Resettlement, The Final Countdown to My Freedom by Terry Ellis and Chris Alston. I'm hoping the lessons that people learn through the books will set them up to be better people. Also, the reason I wrote the book about prison, HMP Help Me Prepare, the guide I'm trying to teach them that when they go there is to do education, do the drug therapy courses, and choose the right sort of people to mix with in prison. It's a comprehensive book. I actually teamed up with a guy called Joe Chapman. He's a prison officer. He's got 44 years experience as a prison officer. He's also a consultant and author. He actually done the foreword and contributed to the book as well. Real lovely fella. And I think between the two of us, we've created something that will help families and anyone interested in reform and prison. So we're trying to change lives instead of destroying them.
Well, you're putting your money where your mouth is, mate. So congratulations on everything. And look, thanks so much for joining us for this chat. The people are going to love it.
Right, brother. I really appreciate you.
All right, take care, Terry. See you, mate.
Andrew, anytime. Just call me anytime you want to do one, yeah?
You're hanging out with Sadie Frost and her sister and everything, doing all the partying and whatever. Did you ever meet Noel Gallagher?
Yeah, I met Noel. I met Liam. Jude Law.
Yeah.
I was with her for 6 years. And so I know the secrets, and I've been offered so much money for the secrets and the story. Unfortunately, I've never told it, and I don't think I ever will. But you know what? They were really nice people. I spent 6 years with them. I was with Sunshine Frost, Sadie's sister. We had the most amazing time, and it was the most amazing experience because I met a different culture of people. Definitely an eye-opener. As far as wealth, I think I was in Kate's place, and it was worth 60 or 70 million pounds. Sadie's was worth 12. Jude's was worth 20 million. My house was worth about $500,000. And then you walk into a place worth 12 and 20 million, you know you've arrived. I can remember being in play with Kate Moss and my girlfriend and Sadie and Jude 3 nights before I got nicked. I was in a £12 million house 2 days before. And then on the third day, I was sitting in Pentonville prison. I was surrounded by cockroaches. It was definitely a life-changing moment for me.
Incredible story.